The camera's tiny red light blinked in the darkness, the only thing steady in that cramped, low-lit room. Alaric Henslow leaned forward, the glow of the laptop illuminating his tired face. His lips curved into a smile, but it wasn't the kind of smile his viewers were used to. It trembled thin as if it was stitched together by force. "Evening. I suppose this will be the last of these," he said softly, voice low enough to sound almost like a secret. His hand lingered near the keyboard, trembling, hovering just over the stop button, though he didn't press it yet. Sometimes you don't realize how fragile everything is, until you see it crack. The room seemed to swallow his words. Behind him, the shadows pooled against peeling wallpaper, stretching like unseen watchers. Alaric's eyes darted once to the left of the camera, as if someone might have been standing there just out of sight. But no one appeared. He gave a short, nervous laugh. If I don't come back, just know, it was never really about me." A pause. His chest rose and fell, slower now, as though each breath carried a weight. His smile flickered again, weaker, almost apologetic. Then he leaned closer to the lens, his voice a whisper. "Watch carefully. You'll understand soon." The recording cut. By the next morning, he was gone. His phone lay abandoned on the kitchen counter, its battery drained and screen black. The front door stood ajar, a faint draft curling through the silent house. His car was still in the driveway, and his final video, uploaded at midnight, began circling online. Viewers debated endlessly. Was it a cryptic goodbye, a confession, or a warning he never finished? One thing was certain. Whatever happened after he pressed stop, it was only the beginning. The silence after upload was louder than the words he left behind. The video dropped at exactly 12:03 a.m. Viewers who stumbled across it in the first few hours described the same feeling, an unshakable chill, as if his words carried something meant only for them. Comments stacked beneath the upload, frantic and confused. Is this a joke? Why does he look like he's saying goodbye? Someone check on him. By sunrise, Alaric Henslow was unreachable. Calls buzzed endlessly on his phone, lying abandoned on the kitchen counter, vibrating against the wood until the battery drained to silence. His wife, Selene Henslow, appeared oddly composed when neighbors asked after him. She stood at the threshold of their townhouse, her auburn hair pinned neatly back, her expression strangely calm. "He needed time away," she explained in a steady voice, as if rehearsed. "He's been under pressure, you know. He'll come back when he's ready." But there was something about her eyes, unblinking, glassy, almost rehearsed in their sorrow, that unsettled those listening. Behind her, the glow of a laptop flickered faintly through the curtains. On its screen, the paused frame of Alaric's last smile stared back at her, frozen in digital limbo. Neighbors whispered. Some muttered of arguments overheard through the thin walls late at night. Others recalled seeing Alaric pacing the driveway alone, muttering under his breath. Theories thickened quickly. An affair, a breakdown, a staged disappearance. But when one neighbor asked Selene directly if she'd watched the video herself, she answered with a smile too sharp for comfort. "Of course," she said. "He wanted me to." Her hand lingered on the doorframe before she closed it gently, shutting the house into silence, and behind those walls, the unanswered question gnawed at everyone who saw that frozen smile. Why did his goodbye feel less like an escape and more like a warning? The cracks in their marriage were only beginning to show. In the weeks after Alaric vanished, whispers about the Henslows' marriage grew sharper. Friends who once admired their devotion began confessing the details they had kept to themselves. Details that no longer felt like harmless quarrels, but warnings no one had heeded. At dinner parties, they remembered, Selene's hand would grip Alaric's wrist too tightly when he spoke out of turn. He, in return, would withdraw into silence, eyes fixed on the glass in his hand rather than his wife's cutting smile. He wasn't himself, muttered Dorian Vale, an old university mate. There was something strained. I saw him one evening, drunker than I'd ever seen. He told me he was being watched in his own home. Another acquaintance, Cassian Drew, recalled a night when Alaric stormed out of their townhouse barefoot, shouting that he couldn't breathe in there. He disappeared until dawn, returning with blood on his knuckles and a hollow look in his eyes. Behind closed doors, the arguments escalated. Neighbors described muffled shouting, crashes against walls, then a silence so complete it felt deliberate. Once a shattered wine glass was found in the alley behind their garden, crimson liquid staining the pavement like spilled blood. Yet to the outside world, Selene curated perfection. Her posts online showed candlelit dinners, cryptic captions about loyalty and destiny. She played the grieving wife convincingly, her voice soft when journalists pressed her about the video. But those closest to them knew better. Devotion had curdled into surveillance, affection soured into accusations. Alaric grew distant, suspicious, and Selene's patience thinned into barbed words whispered through clenched teeth. One friend remembered the last conversation they'd had with Alaric. He had leaned in across the pub table, his voice a raw whisper. "She knows everything, even the things I never told her." The friend had laughed then, thinking it was paranoia. Now, the words felt like prophecy. And as detectives began piecing together his final days, one name kept surfacing. A friend who claimed to know more than anyone else. Someone who might hold the key to Alaric's last night. The first to break the circle of silence was Rowan Elmsworth, a longtime friend who had known Alaric since their school days in Kent. He requested to meet detectives not at the station, but in a dim cafe at the edge of town, where the hum of the espresso machine masked the gravity of his words. Rowan's hands trembled as he scribbled notes into a battered leather journal, each line frantic, half-legible. He spoke quickly, leaning across the table as though the walls themselves might be listening. "Alaric told me things," he whispered. "Things about Selene. He was certain she was tracking him. His phone, his computer. He swore she even knew the codes to his hidden accounts. Said he couldn't move without her shadow following." The detective across from him pressed, asking why he hadn't come forward sooner. Rowan's eyes darted around the cafe, then back down at his notes. "Because he said if I spoke, if I told anyone, she'd come for me too." There was desperation in his tone, but also something slippery. Was it guilt, fear, or the thrill of finally holding center stage in a story spiraling across headlines? Rowan seemed to savor the detective's attention, repeating Alaric's confessions as if reciting scripture. "He told me someone wanted him silenced," Rowan added, lowering his voice to a rasp. "That he was gathering proof. Said the last video wasn't the end, it was just the opening." His words painted a chilling picture, but even the detectives noticed how Rowan's details shifted depending on the question. Sometimes Selene was the hunter. Sometimes it was a nameless figure in the dark, and when asked why Alaric had trusted him of all people, Rowan gave a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Because I knew his secrets. All of them." The officers left with more questions than answers, and that night in the evidence room, they uncovered the first real trace of those secrets, buried inside a hidden account Alaric had never meant to be found. The breakthrough came late one evening in the evidence room, where the glow of a single laptop lit the faces of Detective Marlowe and his partner, Inspector Thane. They had been combing through Alaric's digital trail for days, most of it ordinary. Bank statements, drafts of half-finished essays, idle browsing, but buried deep within a string of encrypted folders was something else, an account no one had known existed. When the screen flickered to life, the files inside sent a ripple of unease through the room. Dozens of video drafts, each more disturbing than the last. In one, Alaric sat in the same dimly lit room where he had filmed his final video. But his expression was different, haunted, frantic. "They're always watching," he muttered into the lens, his eyes darting to the corners of the room. "I can't sleep. Selene says I'm imagining things, but I see them. I hear them." Inspector Thane scrolled further, opening folders of text documents, late-night entries typed in haste, words bleeding into one another. "If something happens to me, it wasn't an accident. The truth is almost ready. Soon everyone will know. The deeper they went, the darker it grew. Notes about passwords, cryptic references to meetings in abandoned places, even a file titled Her Lies. But when they opened it, the document was blank, as though someone had wiped it clean. His last video," Marlowe murmured, watching Alaric's strained smile in the drafts. "It wasn't random at all. It was a signal. But a signal to who?" As the detectives exchanged uneasy glances, one file at the very bottom of the account caught their attention. A video marked only with the date of Alaric's disappearance. They clicked. The screen went black and then, her voice. "Celine's, you promised me no one would ever find this." Celine Henslow sat across from the detectives, her figure framed by the sterile glow of the interrogation room. The fluorescent light above her buzzed faintly, reflecting off the tears streaking her carefully powdered face. She twisted a silver ring on her finger over and over, as though the motion kept her tethered. Detective Marlowe slid a stack of still frames across the table, images lifted from Alaric's hidden files. Her face appeared in several, blurred but unmistakable, her voice echoing faintly in one of the videos they had uncovered. "You promised me no one would ever find this." Her composure cracked. "You think I had something to do with this?" She spat, her voice sharp, eyes flashing. "Alaric was. He was ill. He built fantasies, conspiracies. You don't know what it was like living with him. Every corner of the house a trap. Every glance a suspicion." But her certainty faltered when Marlowe pressed further, pointing out inconsistencies in her timeline. One moment she claimed Alaric had left the house that night in anger. Minutes later, she insisted he'd gone to bed early and vanished by morning. Inspector Thane leaned in, voice low, deliberate. "Which version do you want us to write down, Mrs. Henslow? Because at the moment both can't be true." Celine's tears spilled freely now, anger dissolving into a trembling despair. She covered her face with her hands, her words muffled. "You don't understand. He wasn't safe. I wasn't safe." For a brief second, silence pressed heavy between them. Was it a confession or another manipulation? Marlowe exchanged a glance with Thane. Every instinct screamed that Celine knew more than she allowed. But whether she was shielding Alaric from some darker truth or protecting herself from the fallout remained dangerously unclear. And then, just as the detectives prepared to close the file, another officer entered the room with news. A storage unit tied to Alaric had been found. Inside, a hard drive, and what it contained would change everything. The storage unit was a cavern of dust and silence, its corrugated door groaning as officers pried it open. Rows of cardboard boxes sagged under their own weight, stacked like forgotten coffins. Among them, inside a locked metal drawer, they found it. A single hard drive, wrapped in a cloth and labeled only with Alaric's initials. Back at the station, the evidence room fell to a hush as the device came alive. The screen flickered, static whispering before stabilizing into Alaric's face, not the strained smile of his last upload, nor the frantic muttering of his drafts. This was different. His skin looked pale, clammy, his eyes wide and unblinking. He leaned so close to the lens it seemed he might break through the screen. His voice came out as a whisper, but it carried like a scream. "If you're watching this, it's already too late." A long silence followed. His breathing quickened, shallow and desperate. Then his gaze shifted, not at the camera but beyond it, as though someone stood in the shadows of the room. "They won't let me leave," he continued, his words trembling. "Every time I try, she finds me. Every time I hide, she's already there. This isn't marriage. It's a prison, and I built the walls myself." His mouth twisted into something between a sob and a laugh. "Celine, she said if I told the truth, no one would ever believe me. But you will. You'll see." The video cut abruptly, leaving the screen frozen on Alaric's fearful eyes, eyes that seemed to plead long after the sound had died. Detective Marlowe shut the laptop slowly, the air in the room heavy, suffocating. If this was his confession, then what came next wasn't just about finding Alaric. It was about uncovering the truth buried in silence, and that silence was about to break wide open. The footage spread like wildfire, shared, dissected, replayed frame by frame. But for all the attention, it offered no answers. Only more questions, more shadows. Detectives built their case on fragments. The hidden files, Rowan's testimony, Celine's contradictions. Yet every thread unraveled before it could be tied. There was no body, no crime scene, only words carved in paranoia and a smile frozen in pixels. At the vigil, candles flickered outside the Henslow townhouse, their weak flames trembling against the autumn wind. Neighbors placed flowers beneath Alaric's photo, his face captured in that last strained smile, now more haunting than ever. Celine stood among them, her eyes glistening, her hand clutching the sleeve of her black coat. She looked the part of the grieving widow, but the detectives watching from across the street saw something else, a performance sharpened to perfection. Inspector Thane muttered under his breath, "She knows exactly where he is." Marlowe didn't answer. His gaze lingered on the laptop evidence bag in his hand. Inside was the final video, its screen still frozen on Alaric's wide, terrified eyes. For all their investigation, that gaze said more than any confession or testimony ever could. When the vigil ended, Marlowe returned to the evidence room. He placed the laptop gently on the desk, the hum of the machine the only sound. His hand hovered over the lid before pressing it closed. The screen snapped to black, plunging the room into silence. And in that silence lay the truth. A marriage built not on love, but on secrets, manipulation, and fear. Whether Alaric had run, been silenced, or orchestrated his own vanishing act, one certainty remained. His last video was not a farewell. It was a confession that still waits in the dark, unanswered.